Okay. And from my understanding, you have a second child. So when you had your second child, was there a bit of worry or anxiety that the second child may have these symptoms as well? Because, there's always that kind of fear that when you have a first child that has special needs, maybe the second child could potentially have that. So what was your thinking when you had the second child?
Yeah, when I had the second child, I was a bit worried. So that was why when I got to the GP, when he was about to take his second jab, was when my daughter was about to take her first jab, and I said no, no, no. I didn't want her to take the MMR, and I didn't want him to take the second jab. So that was what I did because I was worried that he might get worse, and the girl might develop autism. So that was why I didn't worry. I didn't bother with any of them having him having the second job and my daughter having the first job.
It's interesting that you keep on mentioning the MMR vaccine. Do you believe that it could potentially attribute to autism or it encourages kids? Like, what do you think the jab has?
Yeah, what I would say is I wouldn't really say that the MMR causes autism, but I would say that those kids are already susceptible to it based on the situation that happened at birth. I went through my son was distressed at birth, and there was a lot. I went through difficult labor. He was distressed at birth. There was a lot of issues that took place at birth during labor. So for me, he was already susceptible to what happened, because of what happened at birth. That was what may be a trigger. MMR could just trigger whatever was meant to happen anyway.
Okay, so you see it as more of like a trigger almost, just
That's
to
right,
encourage.
yes.
Okay.
I see it as a trigger because those kids are already susceptible to it.
Mm. Okay, cool. Right. Moving forward now. So you've got your girl and you've got your son,
Yes.
right? As a parent, did you ever feel like you were maybe spending too much time on your son that obviously had these special needs and you kind of were unable to kind of show your second child the same love? Or was there sort of like kind of issues with that? Or did she ever feel like you maybe didn't show her enough love? Like, kind of, how did you manage that? Because obviously, having an autistic child and having a second child, that sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah, that's right. But I tried as much as possible to pay attention to my daughter. Anyway, for me, I felt that I paid too much attention to her. So mine worked in the other way. I paid a lot of attention, because I wanted to, make up for her to see that I was not paying too much attention to my son. So I paid a lot of attention. In short, I spoiled her with love.
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at things. Okay, cool. So cool. So you've got these two children now. Now let's go back to you. As a mother, as a human being, how have you been able to like, work, look after yourself, have times with your girls, date? Like how have you been able to manage all these things having an autistic son and having a daughter as well? How have you been able to even just, be a human being?
Yeah, for me, I think first and foremost, what really helped me is my spirituality, my relationship with God is the pillar. That's the strength. That's what kept me, and that's what helped me, to be able to manage myself, to manage my time, to manage things around me. And that's my real coping mechanism. I formed that spiritual attachment, and that's what's kept me, and that's what been holding me on, really, to be quite honest. I don't think I would have done anything without my spiritual attachment to God.
Would you say that now that your son is older, what would you say is harder dealing with those formative years when he was so young and susceptible to almost acquiring any habit versus now where he's kind of settled into his personality? What would you say is kind of more difficult navigating?
Well, I think it's getting better in terms of being able to manage his behavior. I'm beginning to understand him a lot more. I know his triggers. I know how he can maneuver life around. So it's quite easier for me to parent him better compared to when he was younger. At least I know him. You know, even while I'm asleep, if you tell me what he's going to do, I know him at the back, like the back of my hand. So it's quite easy. I think sometimes people say that the older they get, the harder it becomes. But for me, I'm quite optimistic that the older he gets, the better he becomes.
Yeah. So I guess just to wrap this up, do you have any like advice for people that have, maybe one or two children and they're trying to navigate this thing we call autism? Like kind of what advice, especially for single parents as well, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, what I would advise to people, firstly, is to firstly know that your child is not the problem. Sometimes we say the child is the problem. Know that the child is a victim. They are going through difficulty, and for you to support them in that difficulty. And the way only you can support them is to develop empathy. When you